Hello, welcome to another episode of A Day in the Library. Today we're talking to Maggie FitzRoy, who is the author of Beacon Beach, a historical novel set in Cape May. And Maggie will be speaking tomorrow at the library, February 15th at 1 p.m. So I read your book and I love the details. I'm really wondering what made you fall in love with Cape May, because I can tell that you are, and what made you want to write about it.
Well, I grew up in Audubon, New Jersey, and spent the summers in Medford Lakes, and my sister Janet works for Cape May Mac. So I've been to Cape May many times, this is my second historical romance, and my first was set on the Oregon Trail because I wanted to do a road trip story. I wanted to do a historic road trip story, so I thought, well, what's the most exciting road trip in American history? I thought the Oregon Trail. That was pretty ambitious because I took the heroine across the continent with the hero in 1845. So my second novel, I just had this idea that I wanted to do a story on a seaside resort, historic seaside resort, and in the 1800s. And I'm a journalist in Jacksonville, Florida. Ponte Vedra Beach is where I live, and it's a beach town on the Atlantic Ocean, and I've done stories on lifeguards there, and I knew historically that lifeguards started at hotels. And so I just had this idea in my mind of a romance at a historic hotel. And truthfully, first I knew about, there was one in was known as Pablo Beach and is now Jacksonville Beach, Florida, in 1886, that was called the Murray Hall. But it was the only thing there. That was it. It was grand. It was this grand hotel, and I thought about setting the story there first.
But with nothing else around it?
There was nothing else. It was just, everybody else stayed in tents.
Okay.
You know, if you weren't at the Murray Hall, you were in a tent. Like, literally.
It's a drastic extreme, you know? Beautiful hotel.
So then I thought, well, what about Cape May? Because Cape May was America's first seaside resort, and a lot was going on in 1886 there. And I knew it well, and then I thought, well, for social media, you can go get pictures because it still looks like that. And it was good for research. And Janet worked there, and she put me in touch with historians. And so my goal when I wrote my first novel, on the Oregon Trail, was to make the trail historically accurate. I'd never been there, it was a challenge. But Cape May, I had been there many times, so that was a lot easier. And I did research and interviewed the historians and found out that it was a really, really fun, exciting place to be.
I felt that when I read the book, too. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love, you've got this great sense of detail where I can see the fabrics of the dresses, and I can see the environs, and I can see the hotels and the jewels, and I love that. Mm-hmm. That was great. Thanks. When you were researching, and did you find anything surprising about Cape May history that just kind of you hadn't thought of, or would be?
I guess I was surprised at how many hotels there were, and they all had really, interesting names. And of course, the fire of 1878. That's kind of why I said it in 1886, because I wanted it to be long enough after the fire that it had been rebuilt. But still Victorian.
Right.
And so I was surprised at how many hotels there were in 1886, and a lot of them grand, and so what I decided to do was, I knew Congress Hall was there. Congress Hall had been rebuilt. And I noticed maps. I studied maps of the fire before and after, and what was where, and I was surprised to see that the lot next to Congress Hall was empty for 12 years. It remained vacant for 12 years after the fire. And I thought, okay, that's where I'm going to put my fictional hotel, Whitecaps. I wanted to create my own. I didn't want to use one that had existed. I wanted to create one, but as I say in the book, it's based on Congress Hall. It looks a lot like Congress Hall, but it's next to Congress Hall. So I told Bob Hindley, one of the historians that I interviewed, that I put it there, and I said, am I accurate about the vacant lot next, oceanfront vacant lot? And he said, yeah, and he started laughing when I told him I put my fictional hotel there. So that surprised me.
I didn't know that either. So that's really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about the past that inspires you to write about it? What's your favorite part? I can tell you love the research aspect too, and those details, but what else?
Well, I think of the past as a place rather than a time that still exists back then. And I'm very into like quantum mechanics and quantum physics and the whole meaning of time, and I really believe that that it's a place, and the only way to go there is to read history, study history, look at pictures, and that fascinates me because the only way really to go there is in your imagination. We're stuck in the present.
I love that that's your answer because that fits into my next question was just kind of a silly question and a fun question, but if you had a time machine and you could go back or forward anywhere, what would you do?
Well, I thought about the time machine aspect, but again, that plays with your head because if whatever you change in the past then it changes the present. But if I could go back, I've always thought about that. I would either go back to 1776 Philadelphia, which I'm reading about now. I'm reading a book on Thomas Jefferson because I read a lot of biographies, and or biblical times when Jesus was preaching. But the only problem then is they didn't speak English, and
Yeah, it'd have to be like Doctor Who. Their time machine also provided you with translation and everything you could understand.
Right, so I really think I would choose to go back to 1776 Philadelphia. So
that would definitely be an interesting thing.
Although I should say 1886 Cape May now, and I probably would.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But you've created this whole thing. Wouldn't you, like, if you went back to 1886 Cape May and found it, like, just ever so slightly different, would it be disappointing? I mean,
it would be fascinating.
Exciting to see if you managed to, like, get that feeling exactly, because we think you did. It feels like it when you read the book.
Yeah, I think I would be open to whatever it really was. I would probably be surprised somewhat by the people. Probably are slightly different. I think for the most part they're thinner. It just depends. I think in a place like Cape May, it was probably very upscale and very pristine. I think, but a lot of places, if you went to the past, if you study historical pictures, they're dirtier than you expect. And like the town that I mentioned, Pablo Beach, where originally we had an archivist in the museum there, and I questioned her. I said, the pictures, they have a lot of historic photos, and I said, things don't look as neat. Or she said, you mean manicured? Which I thought was interesting. Our world is more manicured. But I think that what would bother me the most is that I would not find JC or Cole there. I'd be looking for them.
Might find someone sort of like them, but not quite. You'll never find them.
Yeah.
Finally, since you bring it up too, I know that from your website, then from your sister, that you are working on a third historical novel set in Miami. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, that's another fun time. I chose the 1920s because, let's face it, we're all fascinated with the 1920s. And I just think it's a cool time in history. And so I decided on 1923 because it was during the Florida land boom, and my plot involves, the antagonist is a real estate developer. Because there really were, not that it's any different today, but there really were some really shady characters back then that, in doing research there, I was surprised to find they were selling lots on islands that didn't exist. They said they were going to create an island in Biscayne Bay, and they would sell you a lot on it, and it didn't exist.
Selling you the Brooklyn Bridge, but the Florida equivalent.
But then it's because it's prohibition. I discovered that part of the country was the Wild West of prohibition because they would run rum from Cuba and from the Bahamas, and then you've got the whole tropical aspect, So that's why I said it there. The heroine in that is a pianist, jazz singer, and the hero is a detective, which makes it what's called historical romantic suspense, which is, I'm kind of upping the ante on myself, because when you've got like a mystery, you've got to really plan the plot out. So I'm on chapter 15, and it's going well.
Do you have a title yet?
Yeah, it's called His Haven, because the heroine's name is Haven, and several men, I can't go any farther than this, but several men consider her theirs.
Okay.
So it's called His Haven. Yeah. So.
I'm looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a tentative publication date, or not necessarily, because you don't want to stress you? I don't want to stress you out.
I was going great guns, and then I took a full-time job as an editor, so that slowed me down. And actually, I want to get feedback on what I've written so far because of the mystery aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do that, but I'm going to keep going. So I hope by the end of this year.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and I need to go to Miami Beach because they have a Art Deco district there.
Mm-hmm.
And in researching that, Collins Avenue had 3 miles of millionaire mansions. Whether they're still there or not, I don't know.
Kind of like Newport, Rhode Island,
Mm-hmm.
like that, just
Mm-hmm.
a big stretch of all of those big.
So a big part of that book is set there in a mansion that I'm making up, calling Sea Breezes. So that's fun.
We're looking forward to that. Maybe we'll have you back to talk about that a little more too next time.
Thanks.
One more thing. So tomorrow you'll be speaking February 15th at the library about Beacon Beach and signing books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything you'd like to let people know before they come? What to expect from tomorrow?
Well, I have a PowerPoint presentation, and because I did everything in Beacon Beach as far as Cape May goes is as accurate as I could make it. The only thing fictional is the Hotel Whitecaps that I created. So I have historic photos from Cape May, and Congress Hall is in it. The lighthouse is the lighthouse is on the cover. That is actually the lighthouse on the cover. The lighthouse is a big part of it, and the other places are in the book. So I have a PowerPoint presentation, that shows the historic photos, and then so you get in your mind. One thing I found fascinating, and I don't know if anybody, if it's popular around here, but PBS right now has the show Sanditon. It's Jane Austen's last novel. She only made it, I think, to chapter 11, and before she died. But she had started it, and it's based on a seaside resort in England.
Ah.
And when I watched the first episode, of course, her plot is completely different, and somebody else had to finish it. It remained unfinished up until recently, I think. But they said they had a good enough grasp of the plot and the characters to finish it. But her heroine and some of the characters actually go swimming with the full bathing costumes that the women wore, which is a big part of Beacon Beach, especially in the beginning. The only difference is when I did my research, I found out in Cape May, and it was true, I think, in other places, that in 1886, the women were still wearing the cap, the dress, the shoes, everything. But the men had basically tank tops and pants that were tight-fitting that went about to their knees. But earlier than that, including in Cape May, from my research, the men swam nude. And that's the case in Sanditon. They actually... Yeah, but that's another reason I picked it. I didn't want to go there.
Yeah. Well, and people don't think about that because they think the Victorians are so stuffy.
Right.
You would never think, ever, that anyone would swim nude. You'd figure everyone being practically armor,
No, they did. And the men actually had a set time. And when it was their time to swim, like in front of these hotels, the women were not allowed anywhere near. This is earlier than my book, but then when the women swam, they swam fully clothed. And some of them even went out and bathing machines. I mean, they would the bathing machines.
Yes. Did they have them in the States? I always read about them in
They
British
did.
books. But
they had them in Cape May, but
can you describe them a little bit so people
they
can get an idea?
they were basically horse drawn, like I don't know how you would describe it, like a camper.
Okay.
But like it was like a bathhouse on wheels. I mean, the woman and her maid, you had to have a maid to get the costume on. She would get in the bathing wagon, probably right outside her room, fully clothed in her regular clothes, with her bathing costume in this wagon, and then you'd close the door. I don't know if there was even any windows in it. And so as the horse clopped its way down the street to the beach and onto the sand, the woman would change into her bathing costume with the help of her maid, and that actually happens in Sanditon. They show that in Sanditon. And then the horse goes all the way into the water so that the wheels are halfway in the water, and then when the woman gets out, she's facing away from the hotel so nobody can see her get out because she doesn't want to be seen wet. So she swims like away out of the view of the people. But that was not very popular. By 1886, probably only the older women were using those, so I chose not to really put that in the book. But I do have, as part of the plot, that it is rather risque. The men they would stand on the beach, and when the women were in the water, and it was fun for them because when the costumes got wet, they stuck. So they showed the curves. And this is in the book, and it's true, they would fanny dip, and they would dip most of them, except my heroine doesn't, but they would go in up to like their thighs and then dip their fannies to cool off. And then the men would all be standing watching from the shore, and then the women would go, "Oh, I need to be rescued." And so it was a game they all played, but that's not what happens with my hero and heroine. They're more. I'll let you read it. So, but it happened in real life. I think that's fun. It's so different from us. That's what I like about the past. It's a different place, and to go back there, the only way is in your imagination. And so, if that's the only way, then why not?
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for taking us back to that point in time with your book.
Mm-hmm.
It was an enjoyable read, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.